Have you seen news lately and all the talk about how AI data centers use up all the water, make the water disappear, how they're terrible for water, and how we're gonna face a global water crisis because of it? I have. Hi, my name is Emilia, and I am a researcher in multi-species development and multi-species design. I look into how can we bring nature into our human decision making. How can we look at a world through the lens of human nature interconnection and entanglement rather than solely looking at humans and what we need to do? And this is Multispecies Digest podcast. Well, I talk about different aspects of multi-species ideas, and today I'll do a multi-species analysis of the data centers and their use of water for cooling. Why I was inspired to record this episode is because there's so many news coming out. I see so many reels on my Instagram. Whatever news outlet I see is that there's not enough water for data centers. The data centers use up far more water than they need to, that we are facing droughts and really heavy consequences in terms of droughts, especially in the US, due to the massive expansion of data centers, also protest of people, and really people rallying around the idea that they don't want AI because also of water, other issues as well, but water is one of the keys. And then just recently, just this week, the UN released a warning that we're facing global water bankruptcy. And while in many ways I agree with these sentiments, something wasn't sitting right with me. As a multi-species researcher, I was thinking, this is not the whole story. So today I'll share an insight that has been sitting in my head for a while, is that the AI data centers, they do not make water disappear. They do not use up water. In some ways, yes, that statement is true, but overall, AI data centers displace water. They move it somewhere else, and right now we don't know where. So, how did I get to this conclusion? We'll figure it out in this episode. If multi-species or living with nature, along nature, in harmony with nature is something that you're interested in, please like the episode and consider subscribing to the podcast, to the YouTube channel. And also Multi-Species Digest has a newsletter over on Substack. So I'll explain you my logic, and hopefully by the end of the episode, you can leave me in the comments whether you agree with my thinking or not. So, what is an AI data center? We need to back it up a little bit before we go into full mode explanation. So, AI data center is pretty much a place with a bunch of computers. Like you have your laptop or your phone, it does some sort of computing, some sort of computation. So AI data center is a place with a bunch of computers that when you write into ChatGPT or ask Claude to design or code something for you, it sends a request to the data center, and then those computers there do the computing. We have had data centers before, but right now with AI, they are booming. So many of them now, some of the images in the US are truly horrifying. They are these massive football size or double, triple, 5 sizes of football or soccer, whichever football you play. These huge facilities that are filled with computers that do the computing. They have an elevated floor so that they can circulate the air, and the goal is to compute and store data and make the AI boom run. And of course, as I said before, we have had data centers. Even this podcast is stored somewhere in a data center. Anything that is cloud solution is actually linked to a data center. So this is not a new problem. But AI and AI-specific data centers have really been increasing a lot in popularity and just booming in the past, let's say 2 years. This past year has been tremendous in the amount of growth that AI data centers have faced. So before figuring out that they don't make water disappear, let's a little bit think, okay, how do AI data centers use water? And again, there are many different ways, but firstly, let's look at what are the commonly identified ways. So what are the common ways people talk about these things? And if you Google, and Google gives you the AI summary that has been made in an AI data center, there are three things that often come up. So these three things are evaporative cooling, and this is the aspect that we'll be talking a lot about today. But it is a method of cooling that uses water to cool down the equipment. Why is it important? It's because that when a data center, when this computer block in a data center works, it generates your AI image for you. It creates also heat. So when this heat is there, if it builds up, it can really damage the system. So it can melt the chips. It can make the computer go slower. It can cause fires, etc. So AI data centers use water to really mitigate, or it's one of the main ways how cooling is done in the data centers so they don't overheat and don't go out of operation. Then the second way that people do discuss a lot also is electricity generation. So what it means is that we use, as a society, as humanity, we do use water when generating electricity. So data centers run on electricity. They need the supply, and we use a lot of water. So of course there's the hydro energy, or if you think of water dams, where we use water directly to generate energy. But also in many of the petroleum-based or coal-based electricity production, we also use water, for example, heating up water to make the turbines run, or cool down the equipment. There's many ways how water is used and used up for the sake of a better, let's use that. It's being used up during electricity generation. So that's the second way how AI data centers use water. And then the third way is manufacturing of parts. It's also commonly acknowledged that, of course, each AI data centers includes many parts. There's so many of these plates, electrical circuits, grids, wires, whatever else not. And in the production of these items, we use also a lot of water for different, for example, we are smelting different metals. We use water when we are creating the boards themselves, also distilled water for cleaning and isolation and whatever else not. There's many ways how water is used during manufacturing processes of electronics, from material extraction to the moment that electronic device enters the AI data centers. So these are the common ways, but as a multi-species researcher myself, I like to look at things systematically. So these are just three ways, and in my brain I'm like thinking, okay, these do not cover the whole, what I call multi-species analysis arena. And this is a thinking tool that I have developed for myself during my PhD studies, where we can analyze how something like an AI data centers interacts with nature or certain elements of nature. For example, in this case, water. So how does AI data center link with water? We can think across kind of a grid, so to say. So on the horizontal axis, we have the whole life cycle of this solution. So the whole life cycle of the data center and the components in the data center. So that would be from material extraction, then manufacturing, installation, use, removal, and disposal. So that's on one lane. On the other lane, we can also think, and I think this is where a lot of times people trip up, because when they think of how AI data center links to water, they often will think the immediate site. So, okay, here is the data center. how does it link to water here? But if we think in multi-species terms, we need to think also at different distances and locations. So here, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm providing you with a grid with 4 distances. So we think of site, of course, immediately where the data center is located, but then also locally. So the neighborhood, town, or city where it's located. Zooming a little bit out, we can talk regionally or nationally. So the state or the country where this is located, and also the geographical region. For example, a data center in Finland, in Helsinki, the regional impact could be the whole Finland, the Nordic Europe, or also the whole Europe overall. So that's the regional space. And then the next or the biggest scale that we could think of or need to think of also is the global. So how does the data center or its activities relate to water supply across the globe? Or how does it relate to the global weather patterns and systems? So this is the multi-species arena that I use in my work. And if you would like to adopt it for yourself, I'd be happy if you do as well. But so again, we go through the whole life cycle of the solution and its components, and then also on the site, in the city, in the country, in the region, and globally. Now, if we look at this arena and how we would place, how typically people talk about how AI data centers relate to water, we would notice that like the cooling is talked about immediate use and on the site or maybe locally, also regionally, but mostly on the site and locally. Then the electricity generation is it also during use time, but also locally or regionally. And then if we talk about the manufacturing of parts, most often time it links to global impact because the parts are rarely manufactured in the same place, or a lot of these chips and solutions or these computational plates, many of them are produced in China. So there is if the data center is here in Helsinki, where I'm located, the parts from it came from another part or another side of the world. So we already see like, okay, the 3 that people typically talk about are a small sliver, a very small bit of how we can actually more generally talk about the relationship between AI data centers and water. If I would look from my researcher expertise, and granted, I have not done extensive academic research on AI data centers and water. So this is what I see immediately. And if I would look a little bit more closer, there would be other things. But so if we start from the material extraction and globally, there is a huge impact of AI data centers on water during mineral extraction. The electronics plates use an incredible amount of different types of precious and rare metals. Many of them are mined with devastating impact on water. Both there are certain mining that is done inside water, or the minerals are drained out of the water, but also if they are dug out of the ground, a lot of the, let's say, washing of the things that are dug up is done with water. It is contaminated with heavy metals, with pollution. There's so many things that are done to water during the mineral extraction process. And then continuing to manufacturing, yes, there is also manufacturing of parts that we already briefly talked about. But even before that, to get to parts, we need to get from the minerals we extracted to the metals. And this is where also massive impact happens, because all of this melting that needs to happen. There's so much chemicals and water used to take minerals we have extracted to make them into metals that can actually then be manufactured into parts. Then, if we think of an installation, and I have maybe seen some news talk about it, how a lot of times the installation or the construction process destroys habitats, but it also impacts the water at the site and maybe locally as well, where the water is diverted, it is polluted. So there's a lot of things there. Then the use, we keep the cooling and electricity generation, but then I haven't seen too much conversation talk also about the removal and disposal process. I think the AI sector is in such a frenzy to build as quickly and as much as they can that they're not thinking of what they will do with all of this equipment when it stops working or is not needed anymore. So the demolition of AI data centers when the time comes will tremendously impact water on the sites. A lot of contamination, whatever else not. But also recycling. If we think of recycling of electronics, first of all, it doesn't function very well. But also those processes require water and leave negative impact on water. And finally, let's talk about disposal, which also AI community doesn't seem to be talking about, though there is research on this in the IT sector. But what do we do with the waste that we cannot recycle? Most of the times it's either burnt or then it ends up in the landfill. And in both cases, it interacts with water and can contaminate it and pollute it and do many things to it that make water unusable for humans and for animals, for trees, for the whole system. So kind of poisoning the whole natural environment. So this is the multi-species arena at its fullest. But for the sake of simplicity today, what I really want to do is I really want to challenge the idea that data centers use up water. So what we'll focus today, we'll look at use, and we'll look only at cooling as a process and how all of that then entangles with water. So let's focus in on evaporative cooling. What is this process? And from a physics perspective, it's maybe quite a neat solution. It's just that we're implementing it at such scale that it's quite, it's having a negative impact on what we're doing. So the key idea is that in evaporative cooling, water evaporates. So we have liquid water that evaporates and with it takes away heat. So because in AI data centers, a large thing that we need to do is get rid of the heat. So water evaporation is a process in physics that requires quite a lot of energy input. So we input heat energy into water and make it evaporate, thus using up the heat and releasing the water. So if we look at this diagram, what happens is we have out of the data center, we have hot, dry air coming out of there with a lot of energy, a lot of heat, and we need to cool it down. So there is a device, a reservoir that has water in it and also an evaporation pad. What is an evaporation pad? So imagine you have, like during pandemic times, you had a mask on your face and you would breathe out through your mouth and then you had this pad in front of you and then air would exit on the other side. But it had to go through this layer in front of your mouth. So imagine if this mask in front of your face is wet. So that's the idea between the evaporation pad. So you have a wet mask, wet pad through which you are blowing hot air. And when the hot air meets water, the water takes on the heat energy and the molecules start breaking loose and create evaporation. If there's any excess water there, it will drip down in the box and with a pump be pumped back into the evaporation pad. Then you have this container full of really moist air, a lot of water driplets, microscopic water driplets in the air. So then with a fan, you push it out. And what you push out is actually very moist air. It has a lot of water droplets in it, but it's also much cooler because we have used up the heat energy to make the vapor. So that is kind of the idea. We have a wet thing through which we push a lot of hot air. And then because of physics, what we get out on the other side is really moist but colder air that we can then release into the atmosphere, or in certain cases, they pump it back into the rooms of the data center. So this is the key idea when, for example, you hear this that, well, data centers evaporate up to 80% of the water that they use. This is the process that it goes through. So they have so much heat that they need to evaporate massive amounts of water to cool down and not allow the hardware to melt. But this idea, this snapshot of time where we have hot air, we push it through this wet pad and get cool, moist air, is just a snapshot. And I'm very irritated, maybe, or I really question this narrative that is happening right now that data centers use up water, they make water disappear, because the key idea in my head is that AI data centers, they don't make water disappear. They transform it from liquid water to gas water. If you remember from school, so water can be on planet Earth in 3 states. It can be vapor, so the thing that comes out, for example, when you boil a kettle to have a cup of tea, the vapor, so that's one state. Water can be liquid is another state, and then frozen solid water. So what data centers do, they move with heat liquid water that we have in that spot, they transform it into the vapor. So there's a lot of water vapor in the air. It's so important to remember that, because when we live on Earth, water cannot disappear. It can only transform. And sometimes I think this is what people forget, because when you're on site or in the city and immediately you see, well, all of our water is gone, it has disappeared. While factually in that location it is true, it is not the whole story, because Earth is a closed water system. What it means that we have our planet, and I hope none of you are flat earthers, because if you are, I kindly ask you to leave. But around our planet, we have the atmosphere, so the air that we have, the gases that we have here, and they are held together to the Earth with gravity. So at one point where the atmosphere ends and space begins is also a closed boundary which water molecules cannot cross. That means the water that is here on Earth is contained in this bubble, like imagine a water balloon. So there is a lining which water cannot cross. All the water that we have stays on Earth. It just moves around in different ways. And we really need to remember that, because when we have data centers that evaporate our water, yes, the water has left the site, but it is trapped in the atmosphere now. It hasn't left the Earth. We haven't really lost the water. It just has moved to a different location on Earth. So now it is in the atmosphere. And it's important also to remember that, because it allows us then to track the next steps of what happens to that water. Water in the atmosphere always becomes rain or snow or precipitation, which would be the more physical or scientific word, physics-based word. So whatever comes into the earth, whatever water enters there, stays there. And this links a lot to the water cycle, which I hope most of you also studied in school. If not, please look it up. But a water cycle, the very essence and the premise of it is that if there is a river or a water, then it evaporates. There's also a lot of natural processes where water evaporates. But in this case, also data centers evaporate water. When water evaporates, it turns into clouds, the formation that we see in the sky. And the more water is there in the clouds over time, there gets so much water, the molecules get together and form rain droplets, and they get so heavy that it's impossible not to drop down. We still have gravity on Earth. So these water droplets in clouds become rain that rain down and get into the water, get into our soils, and then join the groundwaters or rain over the oceans. And then the cycle starts again where the water comes up again. So the water cycle continues going. The fact that we have data centers that are now evaporating water at an incredible speed, an incredible rate of evaporation, doesn't mean that the water cycle doesn't apply. So that means that data centers get more vapor, there's more water in the clouds, there's more rain clouds that can form from that, and more water that needs to come down from the sky, either in form of rain or snow. So remember, what goes up in terms of water, what goes up into the atmosphere must come back down. It cannot stay in the atmosphere forever. And this means that when we have data centers that evaporate a lot of water, they heavily intervene within the water cycle and they displace the water. They evaporate it in one place, it goes into the atmosphere. Weather patterns happen, who knows how it's going to evolve. We don't know where, or maybe certain scientists do. I would be really happy to look into that research. But when we evaporate in one place, we don't know where, but it is going to rain. And that means that AI data centers displace water. They move the water from one place into the atmosphere, and then inevitably that water needs to come back down in form of rain. Most likely it is not going to be in the same location where the water has evaporated, and even if it is, it's not going to be at the same time. So there is a location change and also a time delay or a time distance that the water goes through. So to summarize, AI data centers enter into a water displacement pattern. It starts with this using up water locally, dumping massive amounts of water into the atmosphere. Then the water vapor collects, forming rain or snow clouds, and then the water rains down somewhere. Who knows where that happens? So this is the water displacement pattern. The AI data centers, yes, in one spot make water disappear, or whole regions maybe, they make water disappear. But that only raises more questions of where this water will come down, where the displacement will take the water to. So, what can we do going forward? I am not an AI expert, I'm not a policy maker, I'm not a tech bro, so I don't think that there are many ways that us each can directly intervene into decision making at the companies themselves. If you work for some of them, please do. It would be so interesting to work with that. But as citizens, and maybe some of you are either policy makers or politicians, scientists, educators, we need to think differently when we talk about water and AI data centers, we need to think more systemically at a larger scale. Maybe not every one of us, but we need to think about the whole picture rather than just these moments where AI data centers use up the water. So in my opinion, 3 things came to mind when I was prepping. There's probably more, but this is where we could start. The idea is that we need systemic analysis. We need systems thinking. We can't just think of the little bit where AI data center means that all the water has disappeared, because that ignores the context, the whole system of water on this planet. We really need to think, okay, then how does this displaced water flow? And this applies not only to water, but also to air, material resources, and all sorts of things that AI data centers use up. Then the second one would be to have different policy and action locally and globally. We cannot think the same for local action where we are protesting, we are refusing the data centers, we are fighting for our water, we're some of you might be experiencing water shortage. That is one thing. Globally, it's a different conversation. Of course, it is still accounting for the fact that there is water is being removed from places, and how do we address that? But also, how do we figure out where that water will come down? At what tempo are we to expect more flash floods? Do we need a lot more disaster preparedness? There's many things that we need to think about globally, and how do we approach this global water cycle? And the final third one would be to reduce AI use of water. And there are, I've seen many, or not many, a few perspectives that we are using AI, or we are using water for cooling AI data centers because that is the cheapest and quickest solution, and because there is no regulation, these AI companies can do that. So there are ways that will cost money and effort how we can decouple AI data centers and water, at least in the perspective of cooling. There's many other, if you remember the arena of multi-species analysis that I showed you, there are many ways how AI interacts with water, and at all of those we can rethink how we reduce the use of water. Maybe also the big one is, please don't use AI. Please don't ask it stupid questions, the things that you can figure out yourself. Please do not make posters. Please do not make meme gags or fake videos just for the gag of it, or because you want views on the internet, or because please do not ask AI to summarize your emails or write emails for you. This is ridiculous, because the amount of water that we are using for you to summarize your emails is insane. But that is me maybe becoming a bit more passionate about this topic. But if anything that I want you to take away from this video is that AI data centers do not use up water. They do not make water disappear. They displace it. The water evaporates, it goes into the atmosphere, and at some point it will come down as rain or snow somewhere else, and we don't know where and we don't know when. So please take that idea with you. If you like this episode, consider liking it, subscribing it, if you would, subscribing to the podcast, or to the Multispecies Digest newsletter. If you want to see the visuals, the arena, and the water cycle, please watch the video on YouTube if you're, for example, listening on Spotify. But with that, let's think more systemically, let's think both locally and globally, and let's just use less AI.